To install Creatio on your local environment, you can simply open Visual Studio Code, find a command to prepare a zip file from archive. It's called Clio, prepare template from zip file. We can choose the zip file to use for installation. And now Creatio is preparing us a zip file. Inside the zip file, we have database file that we need to restore into our relational database. You can see that the Visual Studio is working right now. Then we need to prepare some templates in the file system, and then the system will actually be installed in my IIS. Now, there are multiple ways of installing the system. Some will go in Kubernetes, some will run in Docker, some will run straight on your Metal. It really depends on you. In my particular application, or my particular choice, is to install everything into my local environment simply because I find it a little bit easier to debug and to work with when I'm working as a developer mode. Now you can see that some actions are being performed. This is one of the processes that you shouldn't be really touching. And once it's done, we will be able to reuse this template or templated application to install new versions very, very quickly. The process of restoring a database into whatever my relational database happens to be right now is a fairly lengthy one, and there's nothing we can do about it. It takes about 35 to 60 seconds depending on the size of my database, and on my machine, it's about 60 seconds. Somebody who's got a little bit faster machine might take a little bit less time. Further installations will take significantly less, and hopefully we'll be able to see the process. Okay, good. It appears that the template has been created successfully, and now that it's available, the next thing I want to do is I actually want to go ahead and use this template to install an application. At this point, nothing really happened from the application perspective, and now we're going to be able to run it. So let's go ahead and run a new command. We're going to say Clio install Creatio. Now I have multiple templates already installed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one, the one that we just created, to install it. Now I am installing in my IIS environment, so let's give it a name. So we're going to say demo, and the IIS port that we're going to live on is going to be, let's say this one. The Redis database that I'm going to use, I can pick a range between 0 and 15, and I am agreeing to install this thing. And once Studio had a chance to do whatever it needs to do, a browser will open up, and it opens up on my other screen. So give me a second, I'm just going to move it over. There you go, and we can see that the first application load is happening right now. Now, in the meantime, Visual Studio is trying to perform some background task, restoring various files. All we have to do is just basically sit tight and wait. It doesn't take too long. There we go. So the application is installed. We can go and log in. Okay, very good. So we can see that our application is now installed, and this is something that we're going to be working with. Now, in the future, if I want to install another instance of the application, this is a cold start, so things are acting a little bit slower. But in the future, if I want to create another application, all I have to do is I have to come back to Visual Studio and say, hey, let's install another Creatio, choose the version of Creatio that I want to install, go through the process. 30 seconds later, we're going to end up with a new instance of the application. So the installation part is very, very easy. Okay, now that Creatio is installed, let's take a look at a few other things that we need to do before we can fully appreciate an experience or fully appreciate everything that other tools allow us to do. Now, when we're talking about a low-code developer or we're talking about a professional developer, the tools we use are slightly different. For example, as a low-code developer, you may never care about the file system stuff. You may never care about things, how they're getting committed to various repositories. But as a professional developer, a full code developer, you may care about those things. So let's take a look at some additional steps that we need to take in order to allow or enable our professional developer to take advantage of all tools we have. So far, we haven't done anything to our Creatio. It's basically coming out of the box. Now let's switch back real quick to Visual Studio. And Visual Studio offers a plugin, which is how we were able to install some of our applications. Let's close these notifications. And so what I want to do is, first of all, I want to register my environment, or I want to register the Creatio that I just installed within my Visual Studio. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Clio Explorer, which is our application. And then if I have absolutely no environments registered, you'll see some context menu, basically allowing you to watch some of the tutorials to see how to use this tool. But what I really care about is I care about this: adding a new connection. I can register local sites or register remote sites if I'm using some other configurations, but for now, let's just go ahead and add a new connection. Now, I don't want to do it by hand, so I'm going to say register local sites. This command will go through the process of reading my IIS configurations, and you can see that it found 4 sites that I currently have registered in my IIS. Now, DA, DA1, DA test, they seem to be all red. DA1 is not responding yet for whatever reason, but the demo, the one that we just installed, you can see a green indicator saying that, I'm ready, I'm available, I am good to go. Now, what you can do here right away is you can see packages and other configuration structures that are important to developer. But before we start doing things, what's important to us is that we install an extension to our application. We're essentially uploading various APIs that don't exist in out-of-the-box solution. What we need to do is we need to triple dot and say install Clio API. Yes, I would like to install Clio API on the environment called demo. Now in here you will see that it's going to go through the process of installing the API, and once it's done, and it takes really a few seconds to install, the application will restart. You can see the indicator telling us that the application is restarting right now, and essentially what we're doing is we're applying changes to our app. Good. Now that our application is installed, or now that we have extended the application with the Clio API, we can take advantage of some of the features and tools that the API allows us. So for example, what I can do here is I can start using the API to get features that are otherwise not really available. For example, I can go to demo and I can say, let's execute some SQL script. I'm going to say select star from public because I'm using Postgre public contact. Public is a schema. And I'm going to say, let's execute. Now, the first time we're executing, the connection is establishing, so we know about this. And then the second one, there we go. So you have full access to your SQL. You can filter, you can query, you can obviously do whatever you want to do with your SQL script, and you have absolutely no restrictions here. Now, be careful because you can break the system by deleting rows or dropping tables. There's absolutely no restriction here whatsoever. Now, if you don't like using SQL scripts through our interface, you can obviously go ahead and use your own database management system, but this extension will work in the cloud as well. So if your Creatio is deployed in the cloud, if it wasn't installed locally where you don't have access to your file system, you can still use this extension to get whatever the data you need, let's say when you're running it in creatio.com domain. Okay. Now let's take a look how we can start creating our packages and how we can start developing an application. Let's create a new app. When you're creating a new application, all we have to do is we need to go into a cogwheel and we basically need to scroll down to our application hub. Now, our application hub is where the magic happens. In here, we can either create an application or install an existing application from a packaged file. Now, we're going to be creating a package in just a minute, but for now, let's just try to create a new application. When we create new, we get to choose what kind of an app that's going to be. We can either create something that is expected to have certain pages like grids to display data, as well as the edit pages for its individual active record. We can create an app that simply concentrates on creating dashboard. We can install something of a marketplace. We'll review that in a bit. And then we can install some pre-configured applications. In our case, Customer 360 and Case Management, you can see that they're already installed. But if they weren't installed, then you'd be able to simply go ahead and install them. If you want to install a completely custom thing and you want to create something that no one has ever thought of, then the custom blank slate application is available to you as well. We're not going to worry about this one right now. We're going to go to the simplest one and say records and processes. When we're creating a new application, all we have to think of is we have to think of a name. Let's give it a name. We're going to say demo app. Now, in the advanced parameters, we can choose some additional options, but at this point, we don't really need to worry about it. We can choose some icons. We can override it obviously later, but as a default, you can choose whatever the icon you want to choose. So we're going to use this little thing. Let's create an app. Creating an application doesn't take long. It just simply creates scaffolds a couple of files for us and writes them in the right place. It would be a pain to do it by hand, so I certainly appreciate this wizard. Okay, so my app is now completed. It's called Demo Application, and it has 2 pages on it. I can immediately run the app, and I can see what my app looks like. All right, so I can see that my demo app was created. It's called Demo App. It has a grid. Essentially, it has certain folders that we don't have anything in. So let's discard this record. So we can create a new record. We can click on the new button and create something new. And our application was placed into my application group. And here's my demo app with the icon that we've identified. Now, what can I do here? Well, like I said, I have a grid. I have folders that I can, filter my records on. I can create a new record, and you're simply getting a default behavior or default starting point for your application. Let's go ahead and add a few fields to it. If I go back into my application, I'm going to start off with a form page. So this one, a form page is where I'm editing active record. So essentially, a form page allows me to define a UI, and this is something that we expect a business analyst or a low-code, no-code developer to produce for us. So in here, I'm simply greeted with the page title, a couple of buttons that are completely configurable, as well as the information that is expected to be on the page. So let's, for example, assume that we want to produce a field here. I'm going to use an email field. Okay, so on my email field, I can, on the right-hand side, I can configure what this field is going to be called. I'm going to say email address. I can give it a name, USR column 2. I can probably change it to USR email. USR is a prefix that identifies me as a developer. When you have multiple developers, it is recommended that each has a certain prefix so we can identify which work is done by whom. Now, the format of the email address, and you can see that we have multiple formats here. So we're going to essentially do a front-end validation on the email. We can add a description, and we can require this field or not require this field. This will be important whether or not you can save the record. We can change editability, whether it's a read-only record that is coming from a database you're not allowed to change, or if it's a read and write. So whatever you want it to be. Now we can also configure the field, the title position, the title on the page, various placeholders and tooltip information for your end user. Now, all that stuff is completely customizable, and that just simply offers a better experience for the end user, the one who's using your application. Now, the important thing here is what happens to this email address. We've created a column, but now it needs to be recorded somewhere. So let's go ahead and save this app and see what happens. Now, as soon as I save the application, the reason it's taking a little bit of time or a little bit longer than previously is because we are now going inside the database and we're actually adding a new column. We're rebuilding parts of the database, and we're doing whatever the backend needs to be doing at this point to successfully be able to query and to store data in our application. Now that we have saved this email address, what we can do is we can just, again, run the application. Nothing changes here. We can create a new record, and you can immediately see that here's my email address. So I can say kkrylov@creatio.com, and you see the validation is working. So if I don't have .com, here's my validation saying, hey, it's not an email. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to say record 1, and I'm going to save my record. That's how easy it is for us to create an application. So now I have a record 1 inside my database. I have a list page, a grid page, and I have an email field on my app. Now, the first time we run it, obviously things are waking up and it's taking a little bit longer. But let's go ahead and take a look how this whole thing materializes for the professional developer. Now, as a professional developer, what you will see is that this whole thing, obviously, it needs to be stored somewhere. That somewhere is file system, and you want to get some files out of Creatio, and you want to be able to modify the files, maybe by hand, maybe you want to commit it to your version control system. So it's important for us to be able to get a hold of these files. Now, these files, normally, they're stored in the database when you're working in the production kind of a mode. Now, there is other mode that Creatio can be a part of, and that's essentially simplifies the debugging a little bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to simply go into our Creatio. We're going to say, hey, show me your advanced packages. I'm going to take this USR demo app, and this is a package. This is a container where everything is stored related to my package, related to my demo app. Now, when I'm storing this application, simply means that I can export this whole package. I will get some sort of a file and I can move it from place to place. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you how Clio interacts with, or how our Visual Studio extension interacts with the application. Now, by the way, if I immediately wanted to go and say USR demo, I believe that's what we called it. If I just simply go and select the whole thing, I should be able to let's see, what did we call it? USR demo app, sorry, demo app. Let's go ahead and query it. And you can see that here's my demo app, and here's my record one, and here's my email. So I immediately get access to everything without having to do much. Okay, good. So now that I have my environment, what I want to do is I want to get these files or get these packages from Clio. Now, when I go here and I say, let's refresh our packages, I should be able to see my package immediately as USR demo. Here are my packages. I can simply click on a download package, and it will download that for me in my file system somewhere. So that's a nice and easy way to get that package. If I want to import, if I want to add some packages later, we can just simply re-import it by hand. Now, what we have is we have this application hub that allows us to move packages from one place to another, and that's part of our offering. Now, let's go ahead and create a workspace for ourselves, something that we will be configuring or something that we will spend a little bit of time in when we're building the application as a professional developer. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to a file system and I'm going to open a folder. Any folder will do. So I'm going to go on the C drive and I'm going to say demo app. So here's my new folder and I'm going to select it. I don't care to save any of this stuff. Okay, good. So I have this demo app and you will see that we have this thing called Clio Workspaces. Clio Workspaces is something that allows us to perform development tasks. So I'm going to go into Clio Workspaces and I'm going to create a workspace. I'm going to call it Demo App or Demo WS for Demo Workspace. Now, when the Demo Workspace is created, there is a bunch of files here. And what's important for us is to configure this workspace and say, hey, this folder works with that environment. Inside my Clio, I can say Workspace Environment Settings. So the environment that I want to provide is the one that I have configured. So essentially this one, it's called demo. So we're going to say demo. Okay. And in the workspace setting, what's important to me is to specify a package, USR demo app. So this is what I want to, put on my application. Okay, good. So now that I have configured my environment, the next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and restore or download my configuration. So I'm going to click on this download configuration, and what it's going to do, it's going to download all necessary files. We'll see that all the libraries are going to be downloaded against which you can program, as well as packages that we're going to be, working with. So let's go ahead here and call restore on it. Oops. Now we can go ahead and restore our USR package now that we've downloaded all the configuration. Here's our package. Here are our schemas, all the JavaScript and, all that stuff. And here's a bunch of other things that I will walk you through later. So if we're going to go and take a look at the list page, and we take a look at the JavaScript, we can easily see our email button somewhere here. So whatever we call this button, let's go ahead and find it somewhere. Somewhere here it's going to be folder tree, demo app. I have to go and take a look at the code of this button. So let's just quickly do this. List page. Hold on a second, not list page, the detail form page. That's the one that I care about. Yeah, the form page. And so the field that we're looking for is this fella. And this is where low-code developer is expected to kind of keep things nice and neat for us, because as a developer, when I'm looking at the code, I have no idea what your email field would look like. And I obviously opened the wrong page. So here, when I'm looking for this field, when I'm looking at this thing, how would I know that this is your email? Well, I can see that it's your email input, but essentially, here's the file that I will be working with as a developer in JavaScript. Okay, good. So now we know how to download application, how to get the files. So the next thing that we probably want to worry about is how we commit, or how we go through the process of saving it, storing it, and somehow distributing this application to multiple users. Now, we in Creatio, we offer multiple ways of to commit or to store our application, multiple version control system. Sorry, I'm losing my words. So when I am working here as a low-code developer, obviously I don't really care for, Gits and other things in my file system. All I want to do is I want to come here and drop a few fields and say, hey, my app is done. I want to move on to my business logic. But if I want to support team development environment, then obviously I somehow have to be able to commit my changes to a common repository. Now, when we're working with Creatio, and we can easily go to here, and let's go real quick to our advanced options. And we support multiple ways to commit your changes. So some changes you can do through SVN. Now, I don't have SVN configured here, but we can be using SVN packages here, or we can using Git. Now, one way or the other, the files that we're committing obviously need to be part of your file system somehow. So one way or the other, we need to be able to get those things on your disk, and then from disk, we need to commit it to some remote repository. Now, the advantage of using with SVN, when we're using SVN, is that we can commit our changes. So essentially this whole folder structure, or whatever I'm showing you in Visual Studio, this whole folder structure, we can commit straight from Creation. This is nice and easy for low-code developer because they don't need to have additional tools. Or we can follow the process that I just shown you, where we download everything on a file disk, on a file system, and we commit it with the help of other tools. Now, what I'm going to be doing is, obviously, I'm going to be using my own environment here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to init a new repository. So I'm going to say git init, and now this whole thing is part of my Git repository. Now, where I push it is completely up to me, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, whatever the case might be. But now I am in repository. So we completely support, obviously, with the help of getting the files out of the system to your disk, we support a multi-user development environment or multi-user development flow in the same way that you would develop any other application. And you don't really have anything specific here about Creatio. We just simply allow you to use standard tools to do the things that you need to know, that you know how to do. So if at this point you're using SVN, go ahead and commit to SVN. You want to commit to Git, go ahead and commit to whatever Git repository you have. Now let's take a look what happens when me as a low-code developer, when I, for example, want to create a business process, or when I want to create something else. Well, if I go simply into my application, I'm gonna say, let's go into my package here, wherever my package is, and what I want to do is I want to create, let's say, a new business process. Now I can create it from here, I can create it from the main interface. There are multiple ways of doing it, but let's say I'm going to create a new business process. I'm going to call it a demo process 1, since this is mainly about development approach, not the actual business logic. So I'm going to call it demo process 1, or let's call it 1. Now on the right hand side we have a code that will be available to us as soon as we save the package. So we're going to say demo process 1, the system will do whatever it needs to do, and here's my code. This is the file that is going to be created for us. Now we can change this, obviously. We're going to say demo process 1, and we can call save on it. Now what happens next is important. Now that we've changed something in Creatio, how do I get my files back into my disk? Well, I go back into my system here. Let me close all this stuff. And we're going to go here and we're going to say, let's pull from workspace. My workspace is essentially the environment. So we're calling a restore, restoring this package from this environment. So what I expect to see now is USR demo process 1 file somewhere in my file system. Now, if I go to my packages, you can see that I have only one package right now. If I go into schemas, here's my demo process 1, and here are the files representing this business process. So whatever you do in the system will be reflected eventually on your disk. Now you just have to follow simple rules to make sure that you pull and push in the right time, but that's just simply how you configure your files. Okay, good. So at this point, we understand that Creatio completely supports working with file system, allowing us a team development process, allowing us to obviously put CI/CD on it. We'll take a look in a minute. But for now, let's move on. Let's see what other capabilities we're allowing with the help of this approach. So here's what I want to do. I want to go and I want to create, let's say, a custom endpoint. So what I'm interested in seeing, okay, well, how can I possibly create a custom endpoint to allow extension of an API? Now, before we maybe go ahead and do that, it's important to remember that Creatio by default offers you great tools to start querying your database. So if you're familiar with a protocol such as OData, it's immediately supported out of the box, as well as Creatio offers its own kind of a GraphQL-like approach to query the data. We call it data service. So between two protocols, between two types or two endpoints, you can already have complete access to your data. So even though we just created a table and we've created a new app and we said that it's called a demo app, we can start querying it. For that, let's go ahead and open Postman. And I'm going to find Postman on my machine. Just bear with me. All right, so let me open Postman, and in my Postman, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to Creatio environment. Let me change a few settings here. Access token, that's not really what I want. There we go. Let's see. I'm going to go to my login. So I have multiple ways to log in through basic cookie, whatever. All that stuff is explained in documentation. So for now, all I want to show you is how we're actually querying this thing. So I need to affect this base URL. So let's go ahead into our base URL, and our Creatio runs on 7080. So we're going to go and change this to port where it lives, and I don't really need to change anything else. All these environments, they're published online, so you can go ahead and just download this stuff and start querying fairly easy. So I'm going to send a login request. So I'm getting code 0, meaning that, hey, everything went well. And at this point, what I can do is I can start querying my Creatio. So let's go ahead and see how we can do this. I'm going to use data service, and I'm going to say get contact cookie or token, so just multiple types of request. And we're going to say DLB, not DLB, USR demo app. I believe that's the one that we wanted to use, and I'm going to get rid of all these filters. That's the only thing that I want to send. I'm going to say send object reference not set. So I probably, oh, I'm sorry, I'm using update. So select query. So let's see. There you go. So I have my record. And I have a bunch of other information that is coming back to me, but the important thing is I am getting essentially everything, or I am being able to query my database immediately without doing any development work whatsoever. I believe we have a key here. It's called all columns. Don't quote me on that, but I think it goes something like this. And if I resend it, there you go. So I can see all my columns. And here's the data. So created on, created by. We didn't even create those columns. Modified on and by. We didn't create those columns. But here's my record one, and here's my user email. And you can see that it's an array of records. So if I have more than one, obviously I'm going to get more than one. Now this data service is something that we use to connect the front end and the back end. And so it's ridiculously powerful, very optimized, very fast, allows you to produce, allows you to put filters, allows you to update, insert, delete records, essentially do all your CRUD operations. Now the same thing happens for OData. I'm not going to go through the process of getting OData, but it's essentially the same thing. We just call the query. So now what about the endpoints? What if I want to create my own endpoint? Now in here, what I've shown you is that you can do a select. What if I want to, let's say, do some custom logic? Now, in order for us to produce custom logic here, what we need to do is we're going to go here into our application. We're going to take a look at some of the additional features that we can take advantage of when we're building the app. We're now going to create a what we call custom configuration web service. Now, a custom configuration web service is something that we need to write code for. It's not something that you can do as a local developer. Now, in here, in our tool, or here, let's say in our workspace, what you will see is you have this option for Visual Studio. So it's essentially telling us, hey, let's open this solution framework. So let's go ahead and do open. I'm going to open it here. So it's loading on my other screen. Now, bear with me. I have a few plugins installed here, so it might take a while before this thing loads. And I'm dragging it on another screen. Okay, good. So let's go into Solution Explorer. Let's take a look at what's going on here. So we have some dependencies that are here. We've got some packages here or libraries here. And here's my demo app. So all the files are essentially here. But what I essentially want to do is I want to create a new, what I want to do is I want to create, so we're going to call it CS for C#. And let's go ahead and create web services. And in web services, let's go ahead and generate a new class. The class we're going to call, actually, let me do it the other way. I'm going to go and add new item. And the new item that I'm going to be creating is Creatio configuration service. Now, the reason I'm using this is because I have a few templates pre-configured. Again, something that we can download. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say demo web service. And now that we have this demo web service created for us, there we go. It gives you just, well, in my case, it gives me a simple template of how my services are being created. So it puts it in a certain namespace. And in here, we're going to say, okay, I'm going to run it in, where am I running it? Whatever the port I'm running it on. So in my case, it's 80. Now, that's just a comment for me to make it easy. And it's going to be a simple GET request. It's going to simply return my name is whatever your name is. So let's save this thing. Let's build this thing real quick. Okay, we can see that it built, it put it in a specific folder, no errors. And what we're ready to do at this point is we are ready to take our application. So now that we've built it, okay, and we're ready to push it. Now the files, if you wonder, now here's the file, here's my CS file, here's my demo web service. And what I can do is I can just simply push it to my Creatio. Now this push and pull happens all the time. So that's something that you get accustomed to very, very quickly. Now, when the application is done or when the application is pushed, what we can do is we can either use Postman to call this endpoint, or we can just simply go to this endpoint, because this is where my Creatio lives, and we can call this demo web service / method test. So let's go ahead to our browser. Let's open the new tab, and let's just simply call this thing. Now, the first time we're calling it, the application might still be restarting, or it might be uploading. So just bear with this. And here you go. You can see my name is supervisor. So now we see that we can answer, or we can create our custom configuration endpoints, and we can put whatever logic you want here. Now, in terms of development experience, it's fairly nice. We can either use libraries that we're getting from a live Creatio. We can have a bunch of SDKs. And what I wanted to show you is a couple of advantages of using Creatio. So let me go ahead and manage my NuGet packages here. And NuGet package, if you're not aware of it, it's a repository for everything, for essentially how people distribute packages for C#. Now, if we're going to go and browse a public repository called nuget.org, we can search for things Creatio. Now, Creatio offers a couple of important things. Creatio SDK, something that helps us to develop our code. Creatio Test Framework, something that allows us to test. And Creatio Mock, something that allows us to mock the thing we test. So with the help of these two, we can write essentially any unit test we want. And with the help of this, we can develop against the Creatio without having access to Creatio. So this is fantastic, amazing. And then people publish against Creatio. They develop things like there's Clio, package validations, and data services. So those are additional things that others have developed and contributed to work with our platform. Okay, good. So now we know how to create a custom configuration service. Now we know how to get the files on the system. We know how to create a repository, and things seem to be moving well. So let's go ahead and do more stuff. So what we want to do now is we want to take a look at some of the features that Creatio offers us to perhaps do a little bit of observability of our application. So we saw from the developer perspective that we can push things into it very easily. We can get things out of it very easily. But what about transparency? What about configuring visibility into the processes that are going on here? Well, there are multiple ways in which you can think about it. I mean, obviously, from what you've seen so far is that there are different skill levels, let's say, required to program in Creatio. You could be a low-code, no-code developer where you can very intuitively create business processes and maybe create user interfaces that are sophisticated, or maybe you're doing something as a professional developer writing code. Now, obviously, the paradigms in which you're developing are different. So let's take a look at the features that you have for each skill level or for each essentially requirement to fulfill your needs. Okay? Didn't come out right, but anyway. So the first thing, how do I, as a low-code developer, see what's going on with the things I program? Well, usually when you program things in Creatio, you're creating these business processes. The one that we've created here, where is it? Here's the business process. This is what you would be expected to do when you are a low-code developer. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's say that we want to create, let's say we're going to go and read some data. We're going to use, obviously, our business process. So read first record in selection. We're going to say that we're using this element called demo app. So we're going to read from this table, and you can see that AI is trying to suggest us things. So based on the models or based on the usages that we've observed and learned and the best patterns, the AI is suggesting, hey, after the element of reading data, you probably want to either read, modify, or use some of them. So it's going to try to recommend you things. Okay, so we're going to read the element. Demo app. Now, I don't really want to just read, so I'm going to switch this element to a signal, and I'm going to say that whenever I change something in my demo app, and I'm going to say record modified, and the change is expected in any of the selected field, and I'm going to say when the change is observed, let's say in the field name, then I'm going to go and start this process, let's say, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm going to read this demo record, but because I'm starting on the signal, I have access to the record that I have created, and I'm going to say, let's start, compare from the signal itself. Okay, good. So I've read my record. I can label it, read record. And perhaps I want to do some other things, you know, like maybe I want to call a web service here, or I want to perform some of these things, or some of these things. These are additional tasks that you could be performing. The point of this is not to show you how to program, but the point is to show you the transparency. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this element that's called attach element to logging system. So let's go and find this edit page. Hold on, where is this? change process, call web service, connect process to object. So add to log. Let's call it this thing, and we're gonna say we're adding demo app, and we're going to use the same ID that we have used in the past. Okay, so I'm gonna save this record. I'm not doing anything else here. I'm just gonna save this. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to go back into my process library, and I want to make sure that this demo process one, when I go into the properties of this thing, that I'm putting what we call a trace. A trace is what will allow us to see the values that we're working with when the process is running. So let me save this record. And we're going to go back into my application. We're going to go into demo one. We're going to grab that record that we've created previously, supervisor. So record one, we're going to call it record one changed, and we're going to save this thing. Okay, so the process, or hopefully the record has been executed, nothing else for us to do. What we want to do now is we're going to jump into a studio, and we're going to go and take a look at the process library or process log. In a process log, we can see that the demo process one has completed, it has executed, and what we can do here is we can look at the execution diagram. Now, when you're writing a process and you're not familiar with what's going on, it will be a nice indicator how many times an element has been launched. So if you have a loop here and you're looping around, you can easily see how many times you've looped before you've exited or how you've taken your logical path. So it's a nice and easy way for you to understand the path that your business process has taken. It's a tool that I actually wish we had as professional developers in real code. It's not quite available. So now that we understand the path that we have taken, what about the data that we were working with? Now we can open this item and we can say, let's take a look at the traces. So first of all, we can see that we were working on this record one. Okay, that's what was available to us, but we can also inspect the values or inspect every element, and that's going to give us a lot more more data, like tracing data. So you can see that the trace of how the item was interacted with, or what the values we had. So we have this broken down into element parameter and the process parameter. I'm not going to get into details of this, but essentially you have the before and after value. So you can see for everything you have before execution and after execution, so you can understand in which way you've mutated some of the data that you were working with. Okay, so you have complete traceability, complete visibility into how your processes run as a low-code developer. You also have elements here. You have the logging in terms of how much time it has taken. So let's say that's your start date, that's your end date. And what we can do is we can go in the column setup, we can shrink it a little bit and add another column, and I believe we have a column called duration. We can put a duration in, let's say, milliseconds, and save this, and we can see how many milliseconds each operation has taken. So you can do a little bit of tracing, a little bit of logging, and if things don't quite go according to plan, you can always come back here and you can see, okay, why is my process taking forever? Now, in the process log itself, you will be able to filter out all the processes that are launched, and you can additionally add a filter and say, we have what we call a process status, and it can be one of these things. It can be an error. This is probably the one that you want to pay attention to. Now, good thing it's a brand new system. We installed it together. There are no errors, but if you ran something and you ran into some sort of an error, you would be able to see all the processes that terminated with an error, and then obviously you have to somehow go and investigate what's going on here. Now, the errors could be coming because your programming logic is incorrect, so you encountered something that you didn't expect, and then your business process stopped. Let's say you divided something by 0. We don't know what to do with that. Or maybe it has some other underlying issues. So one way or the other, you have to investigate. We can't really help you here. Now, this is all great when I'm running this application as a low-code developer, but let's take a look at the experience that I can expect when I am a professional developer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this thing on the side, or maybe I'll try to fit everything on one screen. Let's go into Visual Studio here, and I'm going to close all the code here. And what I'm going to try doing is I'm going to go into my demo and I'm going to say, we have a logging here. So let's go ahead and start logging things. Okay, so I'm just going to say start. Okay, so it's trying to catch my logs now. And we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We're going to go into my application. Here's my demo app. And we're going to try, let me remove this. And we're going to try to maybe perform some developer actions. I'm going to start logging things. And I'm going to go into my record. And I'm going to say changed to. And I'm going to save everything. There we go. Now a bunch of logs started to happen, and you can see that we're seeing all these logs, and the system has finally woken up. I can filter by my logs, and I can do whatever I want to do. But essentially, everything that you wanted to see in great details, in glorious details on the different levels, debugging info, verbose. We can search, obviously, for it. Let's say I'm going to search for some job. Here are some jobs that are started. So you really need to know what you're looking for here. But essentially, all the logs are available to you. You can work with them, you can export them and do whatnot. But in my case, all I wanted to show you is how you're getting them. So it's completely transparent. Now you can create, obviously, your own loggers. You can use, you can make this search in log a little bit easier. You don't want to really work with like a whole bunch of them, so you want to filter on your own. But anyway, that's just the implementation detail. Okay, so now that we have seen the logging, we've looked into observability, we've looked into how we can potentially develop our application, how we can see what's going on with our application. It's time for us to probably distribute the application. So now we're going to talk a little bit about distribution. So there's what we divide into components is there are multiple ways to distribute the app. So one way to distribute the app would be to obviously create a public offering, in which case we're going to go into a marketplace route. And then the other way is to kind of just have this application as your private corporate artifact, and then maybe have it published somewhere on an internal repository. And then whenever you want to install this app, then you can go ahead and install it. So you essentially either keep it private or you make it public. Now, when you're keeping it private, there's nothing for you to do. You just simply say, it's private, I don't give it to anyone. Here's where it's going to live. Like, you create a directory somewhere on your server, and off you go, and it lives there. Now, when you want to make it public and you want to distribute this application, you want to, because perhaps your application is, is going to be useful, what we want to do is we want to head out to marketplacecreatio.com. Now, marketplacecreatio.com is where you can find a bunch of useful applications already, or you can install your own application, or you can publish your own application. So if I, let's say, go to all industries, you can see all the filters here. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a connector here, and I am going to say, okay, show me some certified connectors. Okay, so now what's a certified, not certified? Go through documentation, we'll find out. But essentially, certified is the one that Creatio had a chance to look through and vet the code, and the other ones we didn't have a chance to go through, and we're not going to be going through all of them. It depends on it depends on the multiple factors. But let's assume that I wanted to maybe use some connector to either SalesLoft, or maybe I want to use connector to Cisco, whatever the case might be. So I want to create my own publication here. So how do I go about it? Well, you just simply log in as developer and you upload your file. That's it. It's super simple. All you have to do is you create a developer profile. You have to fill in some information, who you are and what the package is all about. And then when someone is looking for, let's say, connector to a particular instance, they will be able to see this page. So you don't obviously need to produce this page. All you do is you describe your package and you publish it. Okay, so here's your pricing details, here's a support, how we're going to support you, how to install this thing, if you need to offer installation guidelines, if you have specific things that you need to do as part of a package, you obviously have to tell us what it's compatible with, let's say version 8 and up. If there is a type of database that you are targeting specifically, then obviously it has to be here listed as well. So there are a couple of guidelines how to publish things online. But essentially, when the thing is published online, what I can do is I can go into my Creatio and I can say, hey, Creatio, I'd like to find a connector to, let's say, do stuff. I'm going to come back to my application hub. And in my application hub, I can say new application, install from either file, okay, the one that we've produced in the file system, or we can say marketplace powered. If I choose marketplace powered, then like it will redirect me to a marketplace and I can choose whatever it is that I want to install. So for example, I want to install a connector maybe to Zoom, my communication channel. So there you go, connector to Zoom. All I have to do is just simply click install and the application will be installed on my local system. So it's very easy, very transparent. Now, when you're clicking on the install, let's say if you're in an airtight system, let me log in. If you're in, and of course I forgot my password, but believe me, you can log in here. I just don't remember what my credentials are. When you're in an airtight system, what you may want to do is you may want to download this package and install it later, like bring it on the USB stick. So all those things are definitely possible. Now let's jump real quick into our Visual Studio and take a look at how and what we can do with this package. So when we're looking at the packages here, okay, so here's our demo WS or demo workspace package. What we want to do is we essentially want to grab this package and we want to say, hey, let's archive it. We can set a version to a package and we can archive it. Now, versioning is important. We haven't really talked about versioning yet. But essentially, what we want to do is we want to version it somehow. So I want to give it version 1.0.0 at this point. So now my package is versioned. And what I want to do is I want to archive it. So when I click on archive button, I expect that certain things will happen. You can see the build has changed, and here's your package with the version 1.00. And now I can distribute this. I can give it to anyone I want, and they can go ahead and install it. To prove to you that this is actually what happened, we're going to open this in Explorer. Let's grab a copy of this. Let's just create some new folder here, and we're going to say new. Where am I? Let's just go ahead and create new folder. I'm going to do what I shouldn't do, just 1, 2, 3. I'm going to paste this. And when you're registering Clio, the additional option that you're going to have is Clio extract packages. Okay, so we're registering Clio. We're giving you this contextual menu. We're going to say, hey, extract me packages here, please. It's going to go and extract, and you can see that the whole application is here. Everything we've done, the whole structure, very much the same that we saw in Visual Studio. So the artifact of our package from this GZ file is essentially everything that you will see inside your packages. So everything that we'll look through. So here are your schemas, here are your files, your bins, your CS, and all that great stuff. So you can go ahead and install this package essentially and distribute that. So at this point, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about CI/CD pipelines and other things that are available, well, not directly from Creatio, but through our flexible approach to how packages are built and the way we're structuring our application, how we can think about CI/CD and what we can do. So I'm not going to be building it from scratch. It's very dependent on the infrastructure that you have in place. In my particular case, what I personally use is I'm using GitLab, and it's similar to the way you would use GitHub or similar to the way you would use Bitbucket or Azure DevOps. It's essentially the same thing. We have certain infrastructure in place that allows us to perform actions on the files being what we actually have in our repository, and then do something with those files, and then decide whether or not we want to deploy it, right? So your typical CI/CD process. So what I'm going to show you is what I have configured for us. Now, you may have realized that I'm showing you the sales loft, and the reason it's been certified, and I said that Creatio looked at it once or twice, is because it's our package. So here's my pipeline. It's an example of a pipeline, and I have two stages in the pipeline. I do some code analysis, And after we do code analysis, we're running it through Sonar. Obviously, we're executing some tests on this thing, and there's a bunch of checks that we're performing, and I'm not sure if you're going to see it. Yeah, so here's a bunch of checks. Here's your testing, your coverage, and like the unit tests, right? The ones that we talked about. So here's all my coverage for all the packages. Everything passes. Then we do the the analysis on the Sonar just to make sure that we're not using something that we shouldn't be using. To make sure that like we're not introducing code duplications. The usual stuff, whatever you do. And then once that part is done, the next step in my pipeline is actually to deploy it on staging. Now, I don't have a production, so I want to deploy it on stage, but you can easily see how the deployment can change from stage to production. And so what's going on here? Well, you can see that we're using Clio again, right? And we're deploying it to some sort of a server here. But essentially, that's the execution of a command line that I've been showing you from Visual Studio Code. Now, Visual Studio Code, when we use whatever commands here to download or upload, you may have seen that we have a terminal popping up, and we're setting things like Clio, set package, right? Clio, compress. So those are the commands that we're actually executing when we're doing some UI operations. And these commands are exactly the same that you would be running as part of your pipeline. So we're not cheating you in any way, saying that, hey, we're using some fancy stuff that you don't have access to. So everything we do on the front end, that's the same tool that you could be using as part of your pipeline. Now, pipelines can be very simple. Just grab the repository, wrap it up into whatever the file format you need, and install it on Creatio. Or it could be more sophisticated, where you're running your acceptance testing, API testing, you're running your unit test, bunch of checks, and whatever the case might be, whatever your pipeline is. But the idea here is not to configure a complex pipeline, but rather to show you that you can configure whatever you want it to be. Now, the reason that you can do all this stuff, and the reason that you can run unit tests, and the reason that we can do all those things, is because Creatio develops and distributes the SDK and the test framework and all the other things that are perhaps not part of the low-code offering here, but it's part of the larger ecosystem of products that Creatio makes available to public. Okay, so that's kind of the idea that I wanted to put in your head here. Okay, so the last component that I wanted to address is, now we've seen how we can create our user interfaces, we've seen how we can create database tables, and we've seen how the whole thing becomes accessible to us. What about the UI? What about the front end? How do we actually build something cool, something that people would like to use? So let me close this, and let's go ahead to our demo app. What if I wanted to, let's say, in here, when I go and I configure this page, so let me just go and open this page and go in the edit mode of my application. What if I wanted to create a new component that is not available on the left-hand side here? So how do I go about it? So like I want to create something of my own, whatever the case might be. So the way you would go about it is, again, through additional tools that Creatio allows you to consume. Now, inside the Creatio, inside add-on for Visual Studio, what we can do here is we can say that here's my demo package, but what I want to do is I want to actually, I believe, add a UI component here. So enter Angular project name. Okay, so let's say demo component. Okay, so that's going to be my demo project. Vendor prefix. Let's keep it USR. Let's keep it simple. Creatio package name. Demo PKG. I don't know, USR demo PKG or demo UI. I always get confused on these things. And so what's going to happen now is Angular is going to be created for us, or initialize Angular environment. I would say yes, go ahead and initialize that. And what it's doing here, as you can see, it's pulling all the required components from public repositories, such as NPM. It's going to try to install all the necessary packages, and it's going to try to build this environment. Now, this might take a little while because it's npm and things take long on APM, but essentially, as a developer, you see you get access to regular Angular component that you can do things with. Now, this is a demo application that you're getting here, and you're getting just an example of what you need to build, but essentially that's your component. Go ahead and change that to suit your needs, test it with whatever your test framework is. But what we're going to get here is just a simple alert button that we will be able to drag and drop onto our canvas. So I just wanted to show you this process of creating the package, building the package, and then pushing it to Creatio and getting something totally new there. All right, good. So our package is completely is been restored. So now we're going and we're building it. I don't really care about all the notifications that Visual Studio is sending me. It's not part of this process right now. We're generating a bundle for our web component. So essentially, we're creating a micro front end. And now we're going to push this component into our package. So there we go. Even some tests, might run here. So what we will be able to see now is that part of my packages, okay, in the Creatio workspace that you will see is here's your demo UI package. Okay, and things have been pushed into here. Inside the files, you'll see that there is SRC and there's a bunch of JS that was built out of this Angular. Again, we're not going to go through the process of how to build an application here, but trust me, this is just creating a standard component in Angular, just using a couple of decorators that we document really well, and then just following a couple of basic rules. Now that my application has been built, I don't really need to do much. All I have to do is I have to come to this workspace and say, hey, workspace, let's push you. So now my workspace has multiple packages in it. And so you can see that it's uploading, it's uploaded, and now it's going to go and do its thing on the Creatio side. Now, what's happening inside the package, and the reason that we are now including multiple packages is because when we're adding it through the UI, we can easily see what was added here. Now we have two packages as part of our workspace. Now, if I were to delete one line, then you would be pushing just one package. So everything is very developer friendly. May sound like a lot of files, but nonetheless, it's very, very friendly. Now, you can see that few things are happening to my repository, definitely something that I need to address. There's a bunch of files here that perhaps I don't want it to be part of my repository, and we can see where they're coming from. And essentially, it's a bunch of NPM packages and a bunch of NuGet packages that I don't want to be part of my repository because I can always install them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably create some sort of git ignore file here and just simply say that I don't want anything that's in the bin. I don't want anything that's in obj. Is it obj? And perhaps I don't want anything that sits in .application. So let's make sure application is not part of it, and that type of stuff. And then we can just go ahead and remove items essentially from all these directories that are not necessary. Because I haven't made commits yet, it's going to be easy for me to address. Okay, so it looks like we've restarted the application. Everything is done. And what I want to do is I'm going to leave this page and reopen it one more time. The reason I'm doing it is because obviously now that we've pushed something into our environment, we want to open this page from scratch of our page. And in design mode, what we should see is we should see all the way at the bottom. Let me just roll it up, our new component. And there is our new component. So now that I have my component, I can just drop it anywhere on the page. There's a simple button, click me. I can save my page and I can run my application as soon as this saving is completed. Now, this is the way for us to provide our own components. So let's go ahead, quickly refresh this page. And if everything went well, we should be able to click on our button and get some sort of an alert. So here's a click me, congrats, welcome to freedom. And this is exactly the component that we built in Angular. Now, what you can do with this thing is completely up to you. You can provide any of your own custom components. They can be part of Creatio ecosystem. You can bring them from somewhere else, or bring external libraries. The limit is your imagination.